Permission from the Most Noble Triple Gem. Venerable Guru Thero, the congregation of the Mahasangha, Anagarikas, Anagarikas, members of the Jetanarama family, and our devotees who have joined us today, either in person or online. Wherever you may be in the world, we have all just stepped into a new year. On this occasion, I want you all to take a moment to ask yourselves whether you are just an average human being or whether you are special somehow, in some way. I want you to think about this. Are you an average human being? Or are you special in some way? As the many nations around the world would have welcomed the new year, from the poor beggars on the streets to the royals in Buckingham Palace, to the presidents of some of the most powerful nations in the White House, they would have all experienced the dawn of the new year. And I think it would be fair to say that they would have all celebrated in some way or the other. Music, dance, special food, gatherings, parties, get-togethers with friends, celebrations. They've all celebrated what they call the dawn of the new year. See, in that way, the poor beggar on the street and the king in his mighty castle, they're both the same, aren't they? And I want you to think about this for a second. How are they very different from each other? If they have both spent the previous year doing stuff, of course that stuff would have been different for the two of them, but they would have done stuff, things, and then as the new year dawned, both of them would have celebrated the new year with a lot of excitement, and they would have partied. Perhaps as the beggar would have stood outside the street and looked at the fireworks, the king from his castle would have also looked outside to enjoy the fireworks that have been put on display by the subjects of his country. Maybe he himself was the one who spent for those fireworks. But they would have both watched this magnificent display of fireworks and taken some delight in it. This is after having spent a 2024, 365 long days of doing stuff, and then they look forward to the first of the new year so that they can enjoy by pleasing their eyes, pleasing their ears, and the other senses. So how are they different to each other? You call one a beggar and you call the other a king. What is it about a king that is a king? And what is it about a beggar that is a beggar? if ultimately they're both doing the same things, what qualifies a king to be called or referred to as a king? And what is it so missing in a beggar that we feel that it is right for us to call them a beggar? So again, I ask you the question, are you an average person or are you a very special human being? These two individuals on the two sides, the beggar on the street who has nothing to his name, and the mighty king who might be the ruler of a great dynasty, they, although you refer to them as different, by different names and different titles, perhaps they're dressed differently, and maybe they live in houses that are of two sizes, perhaps they eat differently, perhaps their taste in music is different, perhaps the ways in which they enjoy are different, but these two individuals are the same, because they both celebrated the dawn of the new year. So what's so different about them? Then on the other hand, we have the likes of you. Now I'm sure you'll recall how in your past you would have done similar. Maybe earlier this year, or the year just gone, maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, at some point or the other, you'd have also done the same. Looked forward to the new year. I recall this from my own life. Every year, without fail, on the 31st night, I, with my friends and my family, would be on the banks of the River Thames, looking up at the sky, looking forward to the imminent display of a grand display of fireworks. And everyone would be looking up in excitement. And then there'd be a countdown. That was the most exciting part. Everyone there would count down together. That made it even more exciting. So we felt like we were all there together. There were scores of people, thousands, maybe tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people, all gathered around the London Eye, looking up, and all counting down. 10, 9, 8, 7, and so on. Hopeful. Hopeful that when they get down to 1, and then 0 is of course the new year. When they get down from 10 to 1, something very different about their lives is going to unfold. That somehow things are going to change for them. That all the problems that were carried forward from the previous year are going to be washed away. That somehow they'd be happier. That life would take a turn for the better. And things would somehow magically just be fine. I mean, you have to admire their courage, because guess what? They do it every year. Consistently and with persistence. Two great characteristics, don't you think? Consistently and with persistence. Every year without fail, they'd be stood on the banks of the River Thames, looking up at the sky and counting down. Every year hopeful that the launch or the dawn of the new year is going to solve their problems for them, and they'd be happier. See, they never stop to think that we've done this so many times by this point, but nothing actually changed for us. And I remember at the end of that, I mean, you'd have to somehow quickly escape the large commotion that happens immediately afterwards, because there are thousands of people everywhere. Everyone's running around trying to get back home, because for some there would be work the following morning. And then the tubes would be crowded. There would be gridlock on the roads. You wouldn't be able to get anywhere. But people do it nonetheless. See, both kings and beggars do this. So why are you here then? What makes someone a special, extraordinary person? This is the question I want you to ask yourselves. The people I mentioned earlier, they are average people. So what makes you an extraordinary person? Is it the amount of money you have? Your wealth? Is it the size of your family? Is it where you live? Because guess what? Before you get to the countdown, what we would normally do is we'd watch on TV a similar countdown that happens in countries on the left of us. So they would have seen the launch of the dawn of the new year before us. So they'd start off with the United States, Canada, and some of those other nations. And then after you've seen the dawn of the new year in Great Britain, you'd still come back home and you would watch as the new year unfolds for nations on the right-hand side. And so constantly comparing how each nation receives the new year. See, never do they stop to think that this is simply a waste of time. I don't mean just standing outside London Eye looking at the fireworks. I don't mean just that. I mean the whole of 2024. The whole of the year that just passed by, people don't realize that was just a waste of time. Because if something productive had happened during that period, if something good had happened, if something life-transforming had happened during that period, why do you need to look forward to another year where you can finally fulfill your hopes and your dreams and finally hope that you will achieve happiness? So like I said, these were the ways in which I spent my many youthful years. I was a very average person. But today, we have the good fortune of living an extraordinary life. Not just me, but all of us here. See, the new year just dawned. I didn't see any of you standing up and jumping with your hands or the arms in the sky, throwing up in the sky, and hurraying and hurrahing the dawn of the new year. I didn't see any of you singing or counting down or anything of that sort. You understand now that those are things that average people do. People who have not understood that the purpose of their lives is to somehow discover the truth that you and I have discovered today. I have a question for you. You've heard of people who have extinguished the fires of desire, aversion and delusion and come out of samsara. You've heard of this. People who have come out of samsara, this long, never-ending journey of samsara. What do they all have in common? Were they all rich? I want you to think. Everyone who's come out of samsara, what do they have in common? Were they all rich? Were they all kings or queens? Were they all wealthy? Were they all educated? So what about the likes of Sunita and Sopaka? How educated were they? How wealthy were they? Did they all have a big family? Did they all drive good cars? Did they live in palaces? Where in the world did they live? In which part of the world did they live? See, none of these things were common about them. Because those were not the things that made them or helped them to get out of samsara. That's why none of those things were common about them. When you study the lives of Arahants, there's only one thing that was common about them. Not where they lived, not how much wealth they had, not whether they had a big family, not whether they had a spouse, not whether they had children, not what they had in their wardrobes. None of these things were common about them. There was only one thing that was common about all of them. And what is that? They had heard the Dhamma. That was common about all of them. With the exception of the Supreme Buddha, who didn't have to hear the Dhamma because he discovered it on his own. I speak of Arahants now. Every single Arahant in history, that history has seen, if there was one thing that was common about all of them, that was that they had all, at some point, heard the Dhamma. That is the only thing that you can find is common about all of them. None of the things that I mentioned above was common about any of them. So what does that tell you, ladies and gentlemen? How does one become an Arahant? How does one exit samsara? How does one find true bliss and true happiness? Is it by pursuing wealth? Is it by pursuing a big family? Is it by buying yourself a nice car? Is it determined by where you live or what you do? None of these things matter. The only factor that determines whether you can actually find this bliss and exit samsara is whether you have listened to the Dhamma, whether you have come across the teaching of the Buddha. That is the point at which you become an extraordinary human being. The point at which you discover the Buddha's teaching. All of us today have welcomed the new year. There will be those listening to us online right now. Wherever you might be in the world, you have either already welcomed the new year, or it's in a short while. You will be welcoming the new year. What I want and wish for all of you, in the new year, may you be able to discover a new year. Because that is what's going to make the difference. A year that has not heard the Dhamma is a year that is of no use. People say of these things about music, artists, songs and so on. Eyes that have not watched this movie are not worth it. A tongue that has not tasted this food is not worth it. A ear that has not heard this music is not worth it. People say you've heard. What I wish for all of you and those who may listen to these words in the future, let 2025 be a year in which you discover a new year. Which year am I talking about? A new year. A year that has heard the Buddha's teaching. A year that gets to hear the Buddha's teaching. The truth. What true happiness entails. What is the path that helps you to get to ultimate bliss? Because if you don't, ladies and gentlemen, if you consider the new year simply to be another lease of 365 days, well, guess what? All you'll be doing this year is what you were doing the previous year, and the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. Much ado about nothing. Doing a lot, but not getting anywhere at all. That is why we need merits, and that is why you're here today, to engage in this meritorious event of profound merit. And that is why today also is a very significant day for our monastery. From the chamber of the Sihela Mahasaya, today we inaugurate the chanting of noble metta, which henceforth will continue till the endless future. For as long as there are men and women who wish to attain Nibbana, it is imperative that they cultivate metta in their hearts. So may that chant be a constant reminder to every human being, far and wide. Wherever they may be, if they get to hear that there's this metta chanting that goes on at Jetanarama Vihara, people will become curious. What is that for? What's this metta about? What's the purpose of that? They'll ask you. Then you can remind them that metta is something that we must all cultivate in our minds, in our hearts. Because the more you practice metta, the more you are able to realize that happiness is within, not without. So today is a very special day in that sense as well. So before you leave at some point, I invite you to take yourself over to the pagoda of your monastery, the Sihela Mahasaya. Take yourself there and spend 5 minutes chanting the Arimaitya, the noble metta, before you leave tomorrow or today. I forget. But I want you all to join me and join hands with all of us, because all of the monks here, everyone in the family, have resolved that today, the launch of the new year, must be a year in which we all work hard and together to help as many men and women and children around the world to discover a new year. A year that listens to the Dhamma, a year that transcends from a mundane life to one that is extraordinary, a year which helps you to realize the truth, and a year that helps you to come out of suffering once and for all. So henceforth, you will continue, of course, to work with us and alongside us and all together as one. In this new year, we will engage ourselves in many meritorious events. Dakshinayos will be due to come. We have one today as well, the very first of the year. We will have Pirit chanting ceremonies. We will have one of these again at the end of this year. We'll have various other opportunities to engage in merits. And I want you to make the time for that, because this is all that it will be left at the end. This is the only currency that you can carry with you. Everything else you have to empty your pockets. Nothing else will you take with you. This is the only thing that you can take with you. The merits that you have acquired and the practice that you have cultivated. So in this new year, let us all strive for that. Let us work together as one family, because we are all united in that purpose, the purpose to attain Nibbana. As disciples of the great Lord, the Buddha, we have proclaimed discipleship. That is how we always start the new year, as we have done today as well. That's a huge blessing. It's a great blessing, ladies and gentlemen, you must not forget. We are very fortunate and privileged to launch ourselves into a new year with that proclamation, and that is what we have done. So may all the merits that you have acquired throughout the year gone by help you and support you in making a noble resolution on this day, under this one roof, all of us together, at this moment, in the footsteps of our great teacher, Guru Handru, and the companionship of the noble Mahasangha, the Anagarikas and the Anagarikas, who are your brothers and sisters, and your teachers, who are here to support you and hold your hand and help you walk as fast as you are prepared to run. As fast as you are prepared to go, we are ready to help you get to that destination. So may all these merits help you to strengthen that determination, that resolution. And may in the new year, we all be able to take 1 step forward, 2 steps forward, 10 steps forward if you can, and perhaps if you're fortunate enough, complete the journey to Nibbana all together, one for all and all for one. May the blessings of the Noble Triple Gem be with you all.